Hi, my name is Ike Unger, and I'm the lead pastor here at Deer Run Church, and it's a privilege for me to be able to speak to this portion of the life group series that we're going through called Reconnect. And I want to talk to us today about reconnecting to the church. And I'll be honest, I'm tempted to talk only about Deer Run Church, but I think it's really important that we talk about the larger church. In this time, people have disconnected from multiple churches, and I think it's really important for us to look at what is the impact and why should we reconnect with the church, not just a local community, but the church as a whole. So let's start by looking at a quote from Craig Van Gelder from his book, The Essence of the Church, and he says this: "When we encounter the church, we move into spiritual territory that occupies earthly terrain. We encounter the living God in the midst of humanity. We encounter the Spirit of God dwelling in the midst of a people who are created and formed into a unique community." Now, I love this quote by Van Gelder because it connects the spiritual with the earthly. Church cannot simply be viewed as only spiritual, in the sense that it doesn't address the earthly needs that we have or that people have. But at the same time, the church cannot merely focus on the physical, on the earthly. We are called to engage in more than the physical and the social needs of people. Jesus didn't die so that we would have a great time here on earth. Jesus died and rose so that we would be redeemed. So I think it's important for us to keep in mind there is this spiritual and earthly element of the church. So let's quickly establish a general working definition of what I mean when I talk about the church. The transliterary Greek word for church is ekklesia, which means called out. This is the same word that was used for the assembly of Israel, a people who were called out, a people who were set apart for God's purpose. A short definition of the word is an assembly or a gathering. When Jesus launched the church, he called out a group of people to assemble for the sole purpose of accomplishing his mission. They were to continue the work that Jesus had started. This is a fairly simple concept. But things go terribly wrong in history, as they so often do. Over time, there was a transition from a movement to a location. People began to see the church as a group of people called out, and instead of being a group called out to do the work of Christ, they were simply viewed as a group of people that gathered for themselves. And this has had a very negative impact on the church. Now, if you know church history even a little bit, then you see that there was a significant transition from a mission to a hierarchy. As a result, the church went through a very dark and actually a very embarrassing time. And over this period, it resulted in there being tremendous turmoil and misuse of the word church during this time. And also, there was a lot of abuse that took place. The word ecclesia, which is pretty clear, was translated into a different word, a German word called Kirche, meaning Lord's house. This word is from the Goth around the 300 AD, and it was the word where the English language gets the word church from. And this word, Kirche, has a very different meaning than ecclesia. So over time, the church moved from being a movement into being a building. And whoever controlled the building controlled the church, and whoever controlled the church controlled the scriptures, and whoever controlled the scriptures controlled the people, and over time, whoever controlled the people also controlled the government. And this resulted in a tremendous abuse of power and had no reflection on what Jesus had at first started. So what was started in 300 AD still has lingering effects to us to this day. The whole concept of Christendom, the idea of a Christian nation or a Western Christian society, stems from this misguided use of the word church. So we believe, as Deer Run Church, we believe that the church is the visible body of believers. the global community of those who have placed their faith in Jesus Christ. Members of this body are covenanted together in local congregation and participate in the ordinances of water baptism and the Lord's Supper. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul outlines how important each member of the church is. When one member disengages, when one member, is no longer part of the church, in an essence, it would be comparable to one part of our earthly body no longer functioning. This would leave the physical body with a defect. Let's look at what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12. He says this: "Just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were baptized by one Spirit so as to form one body, whether Jew or Gentile, slave or free, and we were all given one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many." And you've heard this before. And it's easy for us to get that we are not just one part. There's many parts, but we are one body. Now, as beautiful as all of this sound, and as comforting as this may sound, that, yay, we're, one body, many parts, we all play our role, the reality is that the church needs to address a very serious question. Why are so many people leaving the church? Especially in North America. People are leaving the church in droves. Why is this? Does this mean that these people no longer believe in Jesus? Usually not. But there's a dissatisfaction, there's a disconnect from the church. Let's look at some of the reasons for why people leave the church. And as we do, I trust that you will consider if any of these apply to you. And as we go through these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give us a reason. We're going to look at 5 of them. We're going to give a reason and explain it really quickly, and then ask ourselves some important questions. So the first reason people leave the church is just simply a loss. They've lost the habit. It may have started with one Sunday, then another, and before they knew it, that discipline of going to the church was just gone. These days, it's so easy to do because there's all these interruptions. There's all these, things that you have to do now, which we haven't had to do. And then it's so easy just to watch it later online. And we're actually even encouraging people to watch. And so this habit of attending church regularly is now easier than ever to get out of. So whenever someone says to me, well, I can just watch it later or whatever, I just want to remind us that church isn't just about watching, it is about participating, it is about engaging. So here's the question. What might be some issues with the idea of going to church as a habit? What strengths and weaknesses are there with this habit? So I'll leave you to discuss that later on in your life group. Second reason, transitions. The church gains, but it also loses people when we go through transitions. There's multiple transitions in our lives. For example, when you graduate from high school, getting married, having a baby, moving to a new location. These transitions often result in people leaving the church. Some of these transitions may draw people to the church, but not at the same rate as causing people to leave. So question, what does this say about how people who are in transition view the church? For example, does this mean that they see the church as irrelevant? What does this mean about how people who are in transition view the church? How might the church help people during these transitions? Let's look at number 3, hurt. They are hurt either at church or by the church. Whether a person is hurt by the institution of the church or by a member, the pain often results in them exiting. This is a very sensitive topic, and it needs to be treated with much care. One cannot deny that the church has done an abundance of good, but at the same time, it is made up of people, and therefore the church has caused tremendous pain over its history, and sadly, often it is pushed under the rug. Another important distinction to make when it comes to this topic is that when someone is hurt by the church or at church, there is usually a spiritual element connected to the pain. Spiritual pain is very different for many people to process, and this pain impacts them deeply and usually in a very, very personal and vulnerable way. And often this pain is then also associated with God. So here's the question. Do you know someone who has been hurt by the church? Please refrain from using names, but I want you to not just disconnect yourself, but do you personally know someone who has been hurt by the church? If yes, how did they respond? And how did you respond to them? And then number 4, unmet needs. When I hear this, I'm tempted to be defensive. But the reality is that a person is leaving because their needs went unmet. At the same time, there's been times where I have literally said to people, I think it would be best for you to go to a different church because the needs that you have, I'm not sure we're able to meet those needs here. Now, it's easy to understand why someone would leave or feel disconnected from something that they feel is irrelevant for them or that isn't meeting or addressing their needs. So here's the question. How would you respond to someone who told you they were leaving because of an unmet need? How would you want someone to respond to you if you were thinking of leaving because of an unmet need? And then number 5, they never felt connected. This is a difficult one for me. Because here's what happens. They love the music, they love the sermons, they love the people, etc., etc. But they never feel connected. Or there is a disconnect in what they feel the church should be focused on, whether it's the values or the people. These individuals finally just check out because the connections are just not there. If I'm honest, this is the one that makes me feel the most helpless. It breaks my heart when I see someone who wants to be part of a community struggle to find their place. And at the same time, to see people trying to engage them, but the connection just isn't made. One key to get connected is to get involved. Only attending on Sunday morning, only attending in a building like this for an hour or so is not going to really connect you. Sadly, Sundays are often rushed and we don't have time to really engage. And so there's this, if Sunday morning is your only church experience, it's easy to feel disconnected. This is where getting involved is so important. Participating in a smaller circles can do so much to make one feel connected. When people serve together, they usually develop natural connections, but sadly, not always. So here's the question. What has helped you feel connected to your church? And what could the church do to help those who struggle to connect? So there's probably many other reasons we could give for why people leave or feel disconnected from the church. And if you find yourself at the place where you need to reconnect or know of someone who does, we need to address the reason behind feeling disconnected. We need to address those because if we don't address those, we will probably never find ourselves reconnecting. While feeling connected to the church is important, our relationship with Christ is so much more important. The reasons mentioned for why people leave the church are often closely connected to why people also abandon their relationship with God. Our mission statement at Deer Run Church is leading people to become fully devoted followers of Christ. And we strongly believe that the local church is part of our journey, your journey, to become this fully devoted follower of Christ. And my prayer for you and for me and for us is that we will allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to be open in our life group settings to talk about why we may feel disconnected or what could cause us to feel disconnected, and then to find healing and restoration in those places. So please, open up, share with one another about how you are connecting with this church and how the church could help you as you continue to deepen and grow in your relationship with Christ. Thank you very much. Now have a great discussion in your life group.